Welcome to Wartime Heroes. Tonight's story isn't about luck. It isn't about politics. It isn't about being in the right place at the right time. This is about a man who was born to lead, trained to win, and destined to become one of the most controversial figures in American military history. Douglas MacArthur. A name that still divides rooms, still sparks arguments, still makes people choose sides. But before the medals, before the fame, before the legend, there was just a young boy whose father cast a shadow so long it would take a lifetime to step out from under it. If you believe greatness isn't given but earned through blood, sweat, and relentless determination, hit that like button. If you think this story deserves to be heard, make sure to subscribe because this is the kind of legend that shaped the course of nations. It was 1880. Little Rock Barracks, Arkansas. A cold January morning when destiny walked into the world wearing the face of a newborn named Douglas MacArthur. But this wasn't just any birth. This was the arrival of a child whose bloodline carried the weight of military tradition, whose very DNA seemed programmed for warfare. His father, Arthur MacArthur Jr., wasn't just a soldier. He was a Civil War hero, a Medal of Honor recipient, a man whose reputation preceded him into every room. And from the moment Douglas drew his first breath, he was breathing the same air as greatness. The MacArthur household wasn't like other families. There were no bedtime stories about fairy tales. Instead, young Douglas fell asleep to tales of battlefield courage, strategic brilliance, and the honor that came with wearing the uniform. His mother, Mary Pinckney Hardy MacArthur, wasn't content to simply raise a child. She was molding a future general. Every conversation, every lesson, every moment was designed to prepare her son for a destiny she could see as clearly as the sun rising each morning. By the time Douglas was old enough to walk, he was already learning to march. When other children were playing with toys, he was studying maps. While his peers worried about childhood games, Douglas was absorbing military history like a sponge soaks up water. This wasn't pressure, this was preparation. And Mary MacArthur made sure her son understood the difference. The family moved frequently as military families do. From Arkansas to Kansas, from Kansas to New Mexico, each new assignment bringing fresh challenges and opportunities. But with every move, one thing remained constant, the expectation that Douglas would not just meet the standard, but exceed it. In the MacArthur family, second place wasn't failure, it was unacceptable. At West Texas Military Academy, young Douglas began to transform from potential into reality. The discipline was brutal. The standards were impossibly high. Cadets were pushed beyond their limits, broken down and rebuilt stronger. Many cracked under the pressure. Not Douglas MacArthur, he thrived in the chaos. Where others saw punishment, he saw opportunity. Where others found excuses, he found solutions. His grades weren't just good, they were exceptional. His leadership wasn't just recognized, it was demanded by his peers. But excellence came with a price. Douglas learned early that being the best made you a target. Jealous classmates would test him, challenge him, try to break his spirit. Instead of breaking him, it forged him. Every insult became fuel. Every challenge became a chance to prove his worth. By the time he graduated, Douglas MacArthur wasn't just another cadet. He was the cadet others measured themselves against. Then came the moment that would define everything. West Point, the United States Military Academy, the institution that had produced Grant, Lee, Sherman, and every other military legend America had ever known. For Douglas, it wasn't just a school. It was his birthright. His father had fought in wars. Douglas would command them. And the entrance examination was legendary for its difficulty. Hundreds of young men from across the country competed for a handful of spots. The physical requirements alone eliminated most candidates. The academic standards crushed the rest. But Douglas MacArthur didn't just pass. He dominated. When the scores were announced, his name sat at the top of the list. Not second, not close. First place by a margin that made his instructors take notice. Walking through the gates of West Point in 1899, Douglas carried more than just his belongings. He carried the weight of family expectation, personal ambition, and a burning desire to prove that everything he had been taught, everything he had endured, everything he had sacrificed had been worth it. The gray walls of the academy had witnessed the transformation of farm boys into generals, of dreamers into legends. Now they would witness the making of Douglas MacArthur. The hazing was immediate and merciless. First-year cadets, known as plebes, were subjected to psychological and physical torment designed to weed out the weak. Upperclassmen would scream in their faces, force them into impossible positions, demand perfection in every detail from the shine on their shoes to the crease in their uniforms. Many plebes would break down crying. Others would simply quit and go home. Douglas MacArthur stood perfectly still, absorbed every insult, followed every order, and never once let them see him sweat. But being the son of Arthur MacArthur made Douglas a special target. Some upperclassmen saw it as their duty to humble the boy who carried such a famous name. They pushed him harder, demanded more, tested his limits in ways that would have destroyed lesser men. During one particularly brutal hazing session, Douglas was forced to maintain a rigid position for hours, while upperclassmen took turns verbally assaulting him. His legs trembled, his vision blurred, his body screamed for relief, but his mind remained crystal clear. He would not break, he would not quit, he would not give them the satisfaction. Years later, when congressional investigators looked into hazing practices at West Point, they discovered that Douglas MacArthur had endured some of the worst treatment in the Academy's history. His response when asked about it was simple. "It made me stronger." This wasn't bravado, it was truth. Every moment of pain, every hour of exhaustion, every test of his will had been preparing him for something greater. Academically, Douglas was in a class by himself: mathematics, history, engineering, tactics, strategy. Every subject came naturally to him, as if his brain had been designed specifically for military thinking. His professors didn't just teach him. They challenged him, pushed him to think beyond the textbook, to see patterns and possibilities that escaped his classmates. By his second year, Douglas wasn't just studying military history. He was analyzing it, finding flaws in famous battles, proposing alternative strategies that might have changed the outcome of wars. His fellow cadets respected him, but they also feared him. Not because he was cruel or arrogant, but because he represented a standard they couldn't reach. When Douglas MacArthur walked into a room, conversations stopped. When he spoke, people listened. When he led, others followed without question. This wasn't learned behavior, this was instinct. This was what his mother had seen in him from the very beginning. But West Point wasn't just about individual achievement. It was about learning to work as part of something larger. Douglas excelled here too, but in his own way. He didn't just follow orders, he understood them, improved them, and executed them with a precision that impressed even the most demanding officers. During tactical exercises, his solutions were often unconventional, sometimes controversial, but almost always effective. The transformation was remarkable to witness. The boy who had entered West Point carrying his father's reputation was becoming a man who would create his own legend. The academic rigor at West Point was crushing. While other institutions might curve grades or offer second chances, the academy operated on a simple principle: excellence or expulsion. There was no middle ground. Douglas MacArthur thrived in this environment like a plant finally receiving the right amount of sunlight. His mind absorbed complex military theories, dissected historical campaigns, and solved engineering problems that left his classmates staring at blank pages. But it wasn't just his intellect that set him apart. It was his hunger. While other cadets studied to pass, Douglas studied to master. While others memorized facts, he understood principles. During late-night study sessions in the barracks, his lamp would be the last one burning. Not because the material was difficult for him, but because he refused to settle for simply knowing enough. He demanded perfection from himself in ways that bordered on obsession. The physical demands were equally brutal. Dawn runs through the Hudson Valley in freezing temperatures. Endless hours of drill and ceremony under the scorching summer sun. Combat training that left cadets bloodied and exhausted. Douglas approached every physical challenge with the same methodical intensity he brought to his studies. His body became a weapon he sharpened daily through discipline and willpower. During his third year, something shifted. The awkward boy who had entered West Point was gone, replaced by a young man who commanded attention without saying a word. His posture was perfect, not from training but from inner confidence. His voice carried authority that made seasoned officers pause. When he spoke in class, his insights cut through complex problems with surgical precision. His professors began to look at him not as a student, but as a future colleague. The social dynamics at West Point were complex and unforgiving. Cadets formed tight bonds forged in shared suffering, but they also competed ruthlessly for recognition. Douglas navigated these relationships with careful calculation. He earned respect through competence, not popularity. His classmates knew he was destined for greatness, and many resented him for it. Others sought to align themselves with what they sensed was a rising star. But Douglas remained focused on a singular goal. Not just graduation, but graduating first in his class. It wasn't about ego or bragging rights. It was about proving to himself, to his family, and to everyone watching that he belonged among the elite. Every examination became a battle. Every assignment became a chance to demonstrate superiority. The pressure would have crushed most men. For Douglas, it was fuel. His tactical mind began to reveal itself during field exercises. While other cadets followed standard procedures, Douglas saw possibilities they missed. He understood that warfare wasn't just about following rules, but about breaking them at precisely the right moment. His solutions to tactical problems were often unconventional, sometimes controversial, but consistently effective. His instructors took notice. This wasn't just another bright cadet. This was something special. The transformation extended beyond academics and military training. Douglas was developing the persona that would define his entire career. The way he carried himself, the measured cadence of his speech, the penetrating intensity of his gaze. Everything about him projected authority and competence. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was becoming the leader he was born to be. During his final year, Douglas MacArthur had become a legend within the gray walls of West Point. Underclassmen spoke his name with reverence. Faculty members discussed his potential in hushed conversations. His academic record was flawless, his military bearing impeccable, his leadership undeniable. But more than that, he had developed something that couldn't be taught or trained. He had developed the absolute conviction that he was destined for greatness. The competition for class ranking intensified as graduation approached. Every point mattered. Every examination could shift the standings. Douglas maintained his position at the top through sheer force of will and intellectual superiority. His classmates knew they were witnessing something historic. Not just the graduation of a cadet, but the emergence of a future general. When the final grades were calculated, Douglas MacArthur had achieved what few thought possible. He didn't just graduate first in his class. He graduated with the highest academic average in West Point's history up to that point, 98.4%. A score that reflected not just intelligence, but an almost superhuman dedication to excellence. The graduation ceremony was a moment of triumph. But Douglas understood it was really just the beginning. The real test wasn't surviving West Point. It was taking everything he had learned, everything he had become, and proving it in the chaos of actual warfare. The classroom theories and tactical exercises were preparation. Now came the application. As he stood in formation, receiving his commission as a second lieutenant in the United States Army, Douglas MacArthur looked out at a world that didn't yet know his name. But he knew something the world didn't. He knew that everything that had happened to him, every challenge overcome, every standard exceeded, every expectation surpassed, had been preparing him for moments that hadn't yet arrived. Moments when nations would hang in the balance, when victory and defeat would be separated by the decisions of a single man. The boy who had entered West Point carrying his father's legacy was gone forever. In his place stood a young officer who would create his own legend, one that would reshape the very definition of military leadership. The academy had given him knowledge, discipline, and credentials. But what made Douglas MacArthur truly dangerous was something no institution could provide. The unshakable belief that he was destined to command not just soldiers, but history itself. His first assignment was waiting, the Philippines, a distant archipelago where American forces were fighting an insurgency that would test everything he had learned. For most young officers, it would be a challenging first deployment. For Douglas MacArthur, it would be the opening chapter of a career that would span 2 world wars and redefine American military power. The transport ship cut through Pacific swells toward a destiny that would forge legends. October 1903. Douglas MacArthur, 23 years old, stood at the rail watching the Philippine Islands emerge from the horizon like promises written in green and gold. This wasn't just another assignment. This was baptism by fire. The Philippine-American War was officially over, but nobody had told the insurgents. Guerrilla fighters still moved through jungle shadows, striking American patrols, disappearing into terrain that swallowed armies whole. Second Lieutenant MacArthur stepped off that transport ship carrying more than just his gear. He carried 4 years of theoretical knowledge that was about to collide with the brutal reality of asymmetric warfare. The heat hit him first, oppressive and suffocating, nothing like the crisp Hudson Valley air of West Point. Then came the sounds, unfamiliar languages, exotic birds, the distant crack of rifle fire that reminded everyone this was still a war zone. His first posting was with the 3rd Engineer Battalion at Iloilo. Construction work, bridge building, road repair. For most fresh lieutenants, it would have been boring duty, far from the action they craved. But MacArthur understood something his peers missed. Wars weren't just won with bullets. They were won with logistics, infrastructure, and the ability to move men and supplies where they needed to be. Every bridge he supervised wasn't just connecting 2 pieces of land. It was connecting strategy to victory. The Filipino insurgents had a different perspective on those bridges. They saw them as targets. MacArthur learned quickly that in guerrilla warfare there were no safe assignments, no rear areas, no routine patrols. Death could come from any direction at any moment. His first taste of combat came not during a planned operation, but during what should have been a simple reconnaissance mission. The patrol was moving through dense jungle, following a trail that seemed too quiet, too empty. MacArthur's instincts, honed through years of tactical study, screamed danger. But he was a 2nd lieutenant, not the commanding officer. He kept his concerns to himself and stayed alert. When the ambush came, it erupted from everywhere at once. Muzzle flashes from hidden positions, bullets snapping through leaves, shouts in languages he didn't understand. Most men freeze during their first firefight. The violence is too sudden, too overwhelming. Not MacArthur. Everything he had studied, every tactical principle he had memorized, crystallized into pure action. He didn't just return fire. He analyzed the ambush, identified the enemy's positions, organized the counterattack. While seasoned sergeants ducked for cover, this young lieutenant was moving through the chaos like he had been born for it. The engagement lasted less than 20 minutes, but it changed everything. Word spread quickly through the ranks. The new lieutenant wasn't just another West Point graduate playing soldier. He was a fighter. His calm under fire, his tactical awareness, his leadership in chaos impressed veterans who had survived years of jungle warfare. They started watching him differently, listening when he spoke, following when he led. This was the story of Douglas MacArthur's transformation from a child of destiny into a warrior forged by fire. From the shadow of his father's legacy to the blazing light of his own greatness. From the classrooms of West Point to the jungles of the Philippines where legends are born. The boy who learned to march before he could run had become the man who would command nations. His journey was just beginning, but the foundation was set in stone, steel, and unbreakable will. Thank you for watching Wartime Heroes. If this story of relentless determination inspired you, hit that like button and subscribe because there are more legends waiting to be told.